Computer. Welcome everybody. This is Michael Naylor, and I'm the director of Enneagram Maine, and I'm here today with my good friend, colleague, and inspiration teacher, Russ Hudson, who I had the pleasure of meeting in 2006, and I recall that meeting at a part one where it was very shortly after you'd started presenting that I just felt this incredible resonance and this yes in my soul, which inspired me to do the part one, two, three inner critic holy ideas in the next year, along with AWTP. I'm really grateful to have Russ here. He's really been the soul of my inspiration around the Enneagram, and just looking forward to hearing his conversation about his own journey. So thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure, Michael. Always great to get to spend time with you. And gee whiz, we do go back.
We do. More gray hairs.
Glad we got that. They're mostly on my face, but
Yeah.
here too. Yeah.
Yeah, so just wondered if you'd be up for maybe telling a little bit about your journey as a little type 5 kiddo and things you encountered or anything that seemed significant to you in your growth and maturation and, whatever seems relevant.
Yeah. Well, I think as an adult and somebody who's been doing the work and been in therapy and been in various forms of recovery for as many years as I have, um, I would say that the main thing that's happened is I've become more heartful, free with my feelings, and more interested in connecting with people and being in connection with people. But it wasn't always like that. And people who know me well know that sometimes, even nowadays, I'll kind of put up some invisible walls, and I don't mean to, but it's just that's the habit of my nervous system. So, yeah, when I was a kid, I was pretty typical five. My father was in the Air Force, so we traveled a lot and we lived in different places, and that was interesting. And people say, how was that? How did it impact you? And it's impossible for me to say because I didn't have any other childhood to compare it to. My dad, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I was crazy about science. Loved to study everything about science, studying the stars and the planets, studying insects, dinosaurs, of course, all these things little boys might get into. Having a chemistry set, having, a microscope. These were my favorite things. And sometimes playing games. But I was very solitary as a child. I had little friends here and there, but I had no problem just having days just on my own, drawing pictures, listening to the Beatles, you know, making imaginary worlds or, you know, reading books a lot,
Hmm.
Uh, and I didn't see it as a problem, I didn't think that I was missing out on anything. Um, and same at school. There were a couple of times where my kind of outsider status became more explicit and it was kind of ouchy for me. I did not like gym class. We called it PE, right?
PE. Yeah.
I was always the last one picked for the teams, and there
Oh.
was me and a sweet girl. I remember well. She had had polio, and her leg was in a brace. And she and I would always be looking at each other because we were always the last two picked. And she had this physical limitation, and I was the nerd. Um, so things like that would sometimes make me realize that this isolation thing is maybe not so great. Um, but I carried on. I always had champions growing up. So I had some of my school teachers sort of um, took to me and helped me and gave me extra stuff to do and challenged me, and that was really important. My mom was an Enneagram 8, and one of the good things she did, she recognized my thirst for knowledge and understanding, and she never discouraged it. And she would often respond that she didn't know. Um, I'd ask her about some science question. I'd ask her something about atoms and electrons and in atoms and so forth. She said, "I don't know, but I'll get you a book." That was her
Oh,
response. So
cool.
she went out and got me a book about atoms. And so there we go. And
Awesome.
so that was a really cool thing she did. She recognized that that was something important to me, and she never made me feel bad about my wanting to understand stuff.
Mm.
I had I was deemed officially a gifted child, which is, to call that a double-edged sword. I mean, it's really, I looking back, I don't see too many benefits from it around. It was mostly a ticket to isolation, more isolation, and
Mm.
being is a little freakish.
Mm.
Uh, but sometimes people would trot me out to sort of say adult things, and they say, "Oh my God, he's just a little kid," like that. But
Yeah.
I it didn't really start to rub me until I hit adolescence,
Mm.
as you might imagine. When you're a kid, who cares? Kids don't want to play. I could sit here and watch the ants all day long, and I did, and just study their ways, and
Mm.
I would make ant farms and things. And we don't want to get too far into the ants, but they were a real obsession for me for a while.
Yeah.
And still interested in them. I got to meet Edward O. Wilson, who's was the global authority on ants, and
Huh.
boy, did we have fun talking about things. Um, but when I started to be a teenager, I got more and more interested in music and performing. I was, to my shock and awe, and when I was in sixth grade, I had a music teacher who put me as the lead in a school play, which was an operetta of Tom Sawyer, and I played Tom Sawyer. And I was like the unknown nerd of the school, but suddenly I was there singing and dancing,
Really?
and then I started, finding this other side of me, my foresight, right?
Yeah.
Some
Cool.
more creative expression, and gee whiz, when I did that, people didn't want to beat me up. So this was good. That was a step in the right direction.
Definitely.
So yeah, I started turning more toward art and music and things like that. I took up oil painting and just all kind of things.
Hmm.
And my mom kind of dug it. She saw it as me coming out of my shell and finding a way to connect to other kids. And my dad was a little dubious because he thought this might distract me from my academic achievement in becoming, successful in a more mainstream way. He
Hmm.
didn't voice anything much about it, but I could just tell he wasn't as quite as supportive about it as my mom. He came around. He did come around, and later
Hmm.
on, a story he used to tell. He thought the guitar thing was just a distraction, and I kept asking him if I could get a Fender Stratocaster because I wanted to have one like Jimi Hendrix, who I adore. And he said, yeah, yeah. He just thought I wasn't serious. But one, he tells the story. We were living in Italy at the time, and I was really into learning Santana, and I was learning guitar by copying the guitar parts that I heard on the records. And I didn't have any lessons. I just taught myself. But he tells the story. He was walking down the hallway, and I had the door closed so as not to disturb the family. And I was playing Samba Pati, which is on Santana's second album, and he loved that song. But he thought I was just playing the record. But then he listened closely, and he saw that I was exactly
Wow.
playing along with Carlos Santana. And at that moment, he said he realized, damn, the kid's serious about this after all. And he and my mom talked about it and got me the guitar, which was, a big deal for them.
Yeah.
So a little credit to mom and dad for those things. I think, but also going back, and this is a very interesting topic. We're always like playing, what is that edge between being a fiveness, and being, as we say these days, in the spectrum, having some degree of what we now call autism. No one was talking about that back then.
That's right.
I look back at my childhood, I had a number of symptoms that we would definitely now put in that category. I had weird kind of edgy things. I never wanted my food, the different food on my plate must never touch.
Yep.
The milk in my cereal must go under the milk and not over it. The certain sounds or textures would just drive me crazy. I could not stand the sound of a pencil writing on paper. I wanted to flee the room.
Oh, wow.
The textures, it was very odd. I mean, like I hated the texture of corduroy.
Yeah.
Nuts. And all these were kind of like neurodivergent kind of things.
Yeah, yeah.
I was very alarmed by physical touch. Yeah. And my sisters thought it was funny. They called me Mr. Flinchy. They touched me and, sort of jump,
Yeah.
And it was very, I found touch very overwhelming.
Yeah.
And to this day, people, who know the Enneagram will ask me, can I hug you? Or is it okay? I always will welcome. Now, I like it, but I like it better if I know it's coming. If somebody just comes up behind me and grabs me, I'm still a little Mr. Flinchy might come back for a moment. But, yeah, so I had a number of those things. Most of those faded out over time as I got older. And I think also as I learned through doing inner work, and particularly the Gurdjieff work, which we both know about, was so much about embodiment and coming into our bodies. And as I became stronger in my belly center and my capacity to be in my body, some of those old habits relaxed.
Oh, awesome. Well, I remember a tale you told about when you were studying from a distance the sport of baseball.
Oh, yeah.
And just what you went through in terms of your thought process around these people playing. I wonder if you would share a little bit of that.
Yeah. It was, it was baseball, certainly, and just people getting excited watching the sports on TV. I couldn't quite rock it. So what is this? They're getting really excited. But the thing you're probably remembering is I was sitting on our front porch and my dad was trying to get me interested in these things. And he was playing catch with a friend. My dad played baseball when he was younger, loved playing some sports. He was more of a baseball guy than a football guy. But he and his pal were playing catch in the yard. And I just couldn't get it. I was watching, okay, he's got the ball. He throws the ball. The other guy catches it in his hands, throws it back. And like, what's supposed to happen? I couldn't understand what the value of this was. But, what it was, I think in hindsight, I can say, I just didn't understand this kinesthetic enjoyment of that.
Yeah, the catching and
so not plugged into that part of me that just
Interesting. Yeah. That's my son is a type 5 and had a lot of the Asperger stuff, clothes too tight. He'd put his underwear on and would be too tight, and he'd pull it out so far that they would just drop to the floor. And then he would tell me, "Don't laugh." But just that kind of quirky touch thing. And when it came to sports, he didn't have it's like he didn't have the mindset for tracking a ball and catching it and the excitement. And it was really hard for him.
Yeah. Well, it was for me too. It wasn't. And of course, once you've perceived that you're not good at something, you just give up on it. I mean, that's a number 5 thing, what we used to call psychic amputation. That I say, well, that's not going anywhere. Not do that anymore. Of course, you're never going to develop those skills because you've amputated a part of yourself. And that gets more hairy when you get older, and you go out and maybe the relationship doesn't work out, and it's painful, and you're just not going to have any more relationships.
Just the cutting off. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So how did this all proceed? You're in high school and you're a whiz kid and you're up on stage and you're learning music, and What occur? What seems? What's the next unfoldment?
Well, well, there were a couple of things that happened in my teen years. One was the music and the performing arts got more and more important, and I started playing rock bands, got pretty good at guitar,
Mm.
became a whiz kid on the guitar,
Oh.
which gets you more fans than being able to explain physics or biology or various theories, or solve math problems. Just doesn't get the same response, at least in the US and A. So I was doing more and more of that. Um, and I also, during my teen years, developed more of an interest in what we would broadly call spirituality. I was raised in a Christian household, and even from childhood, I was reading the family Bible and pondering it. And how does this match with science, or how does it not match? And
Mm.
I just was feeling all through my teen years, there had to be some deeper answers to the questions that I had about myself, about life.
Mm.
I still, as a teen, I was still pretty isolated, but I was friendlier. And through the music, I made connections, and people thought there was a context for my eccentricity.
Mm.
Like, 'cause musicians are kind of supposed to be weird, and
Mm.
so it's okay. And the high school kids, it's sort of come and listen to me play guitar, and that was nice. But I was also having this growing sense that beyond playing the guitar, there was nothing about the adult world that I could feel I matched.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, maybe I'll just be a musician. Well, this was a little disconcerting to my parents and some of my teachers and so forth, because I all up through a certain age, I never had less than an A. I always straight A's. And then so I just
Mm.
wasn't interested, and had more of a mix of grades. And
Mm.
time to apply for college, and I had long thought I'd go to really good college, but my looking at my later high school academic record, it was good. I was more of a B student than an A student, and so
Mm.
I didn't get to go to some of the schools that I thought I would want to go to. End up going to the University of Connecticut. There's more complexities to all of that. I was there a few years, and a couple of years, and was mostly doing a science education, because that's what I thought I would do, taking biology, organic chemistry, physics, all that stuff. But the tug of music and the confusion and the isolation and not knowing how to sort of be one of the gang was starting to really hurt. Um,
Mm. Mm.
I remember while I was at the University of Connecticut, this is a funny story. There was another dormitory near mine, which was kind of, I don't know, kind of the hippie dormitory.
Mm.
Like all the kind of more eccentric kids were there, and they ran it themselves.
Mm.
And I went over there one day, and in the lounge of that dorm, they were all sitting around or laying around massaging each other. This looked very scary to me. Like, what were you guys doing? And it was really, whoa. So they said, come on. I said, I'm looking, does it hurt? I said, no, it feels good. You should try it. I said, I don't know. I don't know. And then, like, three really beautiful girls who are friends of mine, they said, Russ, sit down in that chair. And they started, one was massaging my feet, one was doing my shoulders, one was doing my hands. And I thought I was going to just fly out of the top of my head. It was so intense. And they're saying,
Wow.
keep breathing, keep breathing. And it was like passing through something, because
Yeah.
I hither prior to that, I couldn't have tolerated it. But I started, and then I realized actually it does kind of feel good, but it feels, everything was so intense for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was the thing. But at some point there, while I was there, I was getting more and more depressed. I got mono one semester, and I was sick, and I wasn't feeling well. I was depressed, and I left school to play music for a bit, because I wasn't sure what else to do. I figured at least my mom and dad said, if you're going to be out of school, you got to make money. So I said,
That's right.
okay. I couldn't just lounge around at home playing strategy games. I had to go out and so the way I knew that I could make money was as a musician. So I did. I
Oh,
went, joined some bands and
oh, cool.
did that for a bit. And at some point while I was doing it, how can I put this? I realized that I really love music and I hated the music business.
Yeah.
And it was really rough. And
Mm-hmm.
it ate at me that because I was a musician, these people who were running the clubs and stuff like that or the bars were bossing me around and treating me like I was an idiot.
Mm.
And I knew I wasn't going to say anything, but I knew I'm probably at least twice as smart as you.
Yeah.
You're treating me like an idiot. So I got this idea that I should go back and finish my degree.
Mm.
But this time I wanted to go to, I had realized I was more of an urban person than a suburban person or a
Mm.
country person.
Yeah.
So I was looking in big cities. I was looking at Berkeley, I was looking at LA, looking at New York. And I had already started living in New York because I was into the music scene here, but also I had found by that point the Gurdjieff work.
Mm.
And the Gurdjieff work was, as you know, the headquarters of the Gurdjieff Foundation was
Yeah.
here in New York City. And by a series of kind of weird coincidences, I found my way, was introduced into that and started the Gurdjieff work. So I
Mm.
wanted to stay in New York and I was
Mm.
accepted in Columbia University. And it was way more suited to the kind of person I am.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
I continued some of my science, but I ended up doing a lot of anthropology and studying linguistics and ended up in the East Asian department
Mm.
and getting a degree in a Japanese and Buddhist history.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so that was, but this was also all going on while I was, beginning to be in the Gurdjieff work.
And
So
how old were you when you came upon the Gurdjieff work?
about 22.
Oh, very young. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
they were kind of a little concerned about that because once I actually got into the foundation, I was always feeling like the young guy who didn't really know the ropes, which I was.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mostly people were kind to me. Occasionally people were not like, don't you know you're not supposed to wear a t-shirt with anything written on it when you do movements? I said, no, I didn't. Nobody told me that.
That's right.
Well, you're getting told now. I said, well,
That
but
cheers
there
me
were
up.
things you're supposed to know that nobody had told
And
me.
no
But
one tells you. Yeah.
no, it was like that. And then we got Madame de Salzman, who was the head of the Gurdjieff work, was still alive then.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure she was also an Enneagram 8. She's quite formidable lady, very impressive. And I think she took a little extra time for me from
Hmm.
time to time, probably because I was one of the very youngest people in the foundation. Like I'm the next generation.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was my sterling qualities. I think it was I was young and
Yeah.
interested. You know?
Yeah.
So she kind of took me a little bit under her wing, and I would be in. She'd assign me to clean her salon sometimes. She'd answer questions for me sometimes, and she was very busy. And I was always hesitant to kind of go up and bend her ear in any way.
Yeah.
But I think I picked things up just from being around her. You know how that is with teachers. You
Absolutely.
learn as much from their manner as
Hmm.
from what they say,
Yeah.
how
Absolutely.
they handle things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just to backtrack. During the 70s, I was like a lot of people that time. I was looking for a path, and I tried, going to different Christian churches, and just never quite felt right. I liked the teaching, but the
Hmm.
organization always seemed for me to be not quite a fit.
Yeah.
And then I was looking at some of the Indian things and going to different gurus and yogis and all that. Same thing. They were interesting. They had some good things to say. Wasn't quite fit.
Yeah.
And I was searching. And then a friend gave me In Search of the Miraculous, Ouspensky's book, which you know all so well. And that book, everything kind of clicked. It just like, yes, 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 yes. And then I was in search of Gurdjieff teachings, and they came to me kind of just as it's predicted. They say if once you're serious about it, you form a magnetic center in
Yeah.
your heart to attract the teaching, and that kind of happened. And I
Mm.
just stumbled upon a doorway into the work without really knowing that that's what I was doing. So people revealed themselves as being part of it that
Oh,
I was
interesting.
connecting with about music stuff.
Yeah.
And I've also often told the story about, meeting Robert Fripp around 1978, I think. He was
Hmm.
playing concerts at a little place in downtown Manhattan here called The Kitchen.
Mm.
He was one of my big idols. I loved his guitar playing and his work he'd done with King Crimson, but he had gone away to be in the work for a while to just
Oh.
sort himself out. He left the music industry for several years and was working with John Bennett's groups in
Oh.
England.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but he had then moved to New York and was living in New York and connecting with Blondie and the Talking Heads and this whole kind of New York music scene, which I was kind of part of
Mm.
uh, as a young whippersnapper,
Hmm.
looking at bigger kids doing cool stuff. And anyway, I went to see him at the Kitchen, and at the end of his performance, he was just solo performing with loops, which now everybody does, but he was the first person I ever saw do that.
Mm.
Um, I went up to him very shy because he's very, I don't want to say it's intimidating, but he's a daunting figure. Probably an Enneagram 1.
Oh.
But I think he would probably agree with that. But anyway, I went up to him and he was just wiping down his guitar afterwards. And I asked him, Mr. Fripp, can I ask you a question? And he had wire rim glass. He looked up at me over the glasses. And he goes, and he sort of looked at me for a moment. They said, yes, I think so. I said, said, I don't want to bother you. I loved the concert, but I'm here because I know you have been doing the work, that
Mm.
you were connected with John Bennett, that you've been
Mm.
doing the Gurdjieff work,
Mm.
and I am a young man, and this is what I long for more than anything. I really
Mm.
want to learn about the work and how to do the work and everything. And I remember he was still as a sphinx. It's just really still. And then this little smile. He doesn't, when he smiles, it's a big deal. He's done once, and he got this little smile and he goes, for a young man interested in the work, I definitely have time.
Oh, beautiful.
Go sit over there. I have to put my equipment away because I'm doing another show tomorrow.
Mm.
When I'm done, I'll come over and fetch you. We'll go around the corner and have a cup of coffee and we'll talk about the work.
Oh,
And he did.
wow.
So this was like, wow, this was like one of my guitar heroes talking
Beautiful.
about what I really cared about. But we
Mm.
weren't talking about guitars. We were talking about, and he gave me a lot of good advice that most everything he told me has panned out. He
Mm.
was correct about a lot of it.
Beautiful.
So that was a big shock point, as we say.
Absolutely. Wow. Very serendipitous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the Gurdjieff work to me is such a mystery.
Mm.
The movements, which I am so terrible at, have this way of creating a shift in my awareness away from my identifications with personality, so that I'm sort of in a new land, a little more spacious, open, less clogged by my beliefs. But it's like, and then I go, how'd that happen? I was so terrible I still am terrible at the movements. I just, I like to move and dance, but the movements somehow have just got me.
It's a different thing.
It's a different
Even
thing.
professional dancers have a difficulty with them.
Brutal. I just humbled there each time, mortified too. But there's like such a mystery to a lot of the work, just this whole idea of learning to, sense your body deeply. What is it about this sensing my body that seems to transform or distance some of the patterns that would normally eat my attention? And I'm always looking for kind of a linear relationship, but it's not linear. Once I'm
Oh, no.
it's like another dimension of of energy. And so I'm always humbled by that too. It's like, wow, this has created a huge shift in my center of gravity, my balance, my a quieter emotionality. But it wasn't by thinking about it or theorizing. There was this practice of sensing the body and being honest as I could be. But I wonder. So anyway, I'm not sure why I jumped to that, except that you were talking about the
It's
Gurdjieff work.
important.
Yeah, and it just it's still very central to my life. So
Yeah, I think of it always, I think, Gurdjieff says a master is a person who can deliver shocks and primarily to ourselves. And I start to realize that every time I remember myself, that is to say, I sense myself, it is a shock.
yeah,
And it brings another quality of attention, presence, energy into the mix.
yeah,
So I'm just kind of grooving along, and then boom, this other parallel process is happening, and that shifts everything. And the trick then is, and I think the movements help with that too, is learning to sustain that.
yeah.
So it's not just a little blink and then I'm back to my usual shenanigans,
Hmm. Hmm.
but to just actually find out how to abide in what opens up. For
Yeah,
example, doing movements or when I come
yeah.
back to sensation. It's a lifelong work. I don't think we're going to run out of resistance anytime soon.
No time soon. That's for sure. It seems to be a vast bottomless pit there that I get to step into. But I was thinking, one of the things that as I I was fortunate when I started the Gurdjieff work that my teacher loved the work that you and Don did. Now that wasn't true of all the Enneagram Gurdjieff folks. Some of them
Oh,
looked at it as a
some like it, some don't. Some think
yeah,
it's awful. Right.
yeah. And he pointed me to you and to Don. I said, "Well, is this authentic teaching?" Because Gurdjieff was all about authentic teaching. He said, "Yes, it is. Trust it and go towards it." So he was responsible. He was my Gurdjieff teacher who got me headed in your direction, and then. So I wondered, it's a funny thing how it's almost in working with people over the years, like I did a workshop from my Gurdjieff group, and one person took it as almost heresy to talk about the Enneagram or to even have a symbol of the Enneagram, and it was so dogmatic. And, so it's this interesting kind of a split in acceptance, because to me, they're all barking up the same tree
Yeah.
around. So,
Yeah. I think that there's a couple ways I hold that and think of it. One of them is that, I think the fourth way is bigger than any particular Gurdjieff group. And the more entrenched Gurdjieff groups don't even like each other.
yeah,
And always pointing to the illegitimacy of others.
that's
If
right.
you focus, you're kind of not looking where you might want to be looking.
Yeah.
And nobody functions very well as police of inner work. It just.
Yeah,
But the more I see people concerned about that, the more they tend to have inner critics the size of Texas,
absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
and it's just not. When I made my decision to move on into working with Almass and the diamond approach, partly it was just seeing that the people who were frustrated with my work with the Enneagram with Dawn, I didn't want to be like them.
Yeah.
Was that simple. I just looked at them. I said, is that an example of higher consciousness? If so, we're in big trouble.
Yeah.
And I said, and not everybody who's doing the work is necessarily touched by the work.
Yep.
One of the last conversations I had with my primary Gurdjieff teacher, who chose to generally be anonymous, although he wrote a couple of books that are interesting. He when at a certain point with me, and some people know this, some don't, when Dawn came in, we started working together, but it was brought to the attention of certain people in the Gurdjieff work that we were in, and they essentially had my teacher come and give us an ultimatum that we had to stop teaching the Enneagram or we
Wow.
had to the work.
Yeah.
And so, given how they went about it, and given that they didn't really investigate or talk with us about it or anything, it was just the last straw. By that point, Madame had passed away. Her son Michel, who I adore, had passed away. Monsieur Tracol, all my favorite teachers, the ones I really got transmission from, were
Yeah.
gone, and there was this new guard coming in that were trying to protect the work. I'm sure from their point of view, but they were
Sure.
crystallizing it. I felt along
Yeah.
some wrong lines,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so
Yeah, my teacher said when I brought this up to him, he said, "Well, the good news is that they will die, and then we won't have to worry about them," because it was so clinchy, really
yeah,
inner critic driven.
that and it's not the way forward. And I felt one thing I learned from Almass that was the whole work around the inner critic, how important that is, and it just wasn't there in a
Yeah,
lot of. Oh, there we go.
a little intervention. Well,
That's a
that's
little inner critic weighing in.
well. The thing that my teacher often said, in the Gurdjieff work is this. I said, why are people so damn serious? They are not having any fun at all. And he said, well, that's because their personality is in charge. When your personality is in charge, you get all dogmatic and stiff and serious, and then you're not doing spiritual work anymore. You're just being grumpy and contracted. So, be conscious of that inner work really should produce a quality of joy
Yeah,
and gratitude.
appreciation, gratitude. These are the signs I've found.
Me too.
And so again, when I encountered Almas Hamid Ali, having left the work, I didn't go very long. My teacher, as I was leaving, he said, they're supposed to say once you leave the work, that's it for you, which is kind of cultish, to say the least. But he didn't say that. He
Yeah.
said, the work is deposited in you. If you remain sincere, another teaching will appear. And sure enough, I met
Yeah.
Alia,
Beautiful.
who
Yeah.
became a teacher to me and Don, and then met Hamid.
Yeah.
And Hamid had that twinkle. He was happy. He was enjoying his existence. He was profoundly present. He was
Mm.
also funny and
Hmm.
kind, and just and
Yeah.
meeting him was a shock point because I reached a certain point, the work, and with utter gratitude, I learned really important things from my time in the Gurdjieff work. But there was a point where nobody seemed to know
Mm.
how to help me bring the next shock. Almost did.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And it was partially the inner critic stuff, partially it was bringing in the heart in a right way. There were a number of things. But one thing that was very touching to me, as I said, my main teacher, um, a few years later developed cancer, and he was battling that, and he wanted to meet with me. And I hadn't talked with him in a number of years, but we got together and would have conversations over coffee, and was asking for support. And what he said that really stayed in my heart, he kind of apologized on behalf. He says, that wasn't really right, what happened to you. And he says, what I want you to remember,
Mm.
we cannot second guess the purpose, so to speak, the intention of the work itself, which we both know is something beyond our personal knowing or intentions. He said, I invested a lot of time in a number of people thinking surely they will be the torchbearers, and almost none of them panned out.
Hmm.
He says, you, I thought, were too intellectual, too this, too that. I
Hmm.
didn't think you had the right stuff for the work. He
Hmm.
said, you have done more to bring the fourth way and the teachings to the world than anybody that I saw as the candidates. And he says,
Yeah.
it's very humbling.
Mm.
Said, I've always tried to do my best to
Mm.
point people to the sense of what Gurdjieff was teaching. I've
Hmm.
always spoken respectfully about all of that, and I still do.
Mm.
But he was recognizing what Hamid said. He said the fourth way is more like a tree. And maybe Gurdjieff was there in the original trunk of the tree coming out of the
Hmm.
ground, but the
Yeah.
tree is branching.
Yeah.
And you don't want to kill all the branches or you kill the tree.
Yeah. That's a
And
beautiful image. Yeah.
he said, I believe this diamond approach work is not the same as the Gurdjieff work, but it is fourth way, and it is a new iteration expression of this, of us learning how to be, as Gurdjieff said, human beings without quotation marks.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he also said, I think the work that you and Don have done and that you're developing is also objectively a growing branch of this tree.
Yeah.
So he said, just one little school is not going to bring the necessary energy and force to shift what's going on in this planet. It's going to take a much bigger movement and a lot of different ways of holding it.
Absolutely. That's what I appreciate about Bennett and his work, and the branches widening. And also Richard Rohr carries that spirit too, with an openness to all the streams of higher wisdom coming in. So I wonder if we have time to even maybe talk a little bit about how you met Don, or if that's the next thing you'd like to share about.
Yeah, sure. I can talk about that, I met Don, as you know, met him in, I believe, 1988. He had published Personality Types in 1987,
Mm-hmm.
and slightly less than a year later, Helen Palmer's first book came out. And I had them both and was reading them, but I liked the systematic approach that Don had to it. And as soon as I read his book, I saw, this isn't anything we teach in the Gurdjieff work. However, I was in the Gurdjieff work at the time. I said, however, I think for studying our mechanisms and to study probably even our chief feature, as we talk about in the work, the core of our imbalance, this could be very useful. So I read it in that spirit. And after, I don't know, about a year, I got that book when it's brandy new. About a year later, I had the nerve to sort of contact him, because in those days there were no cell phones. There was nobody. We didn't really have internet much to speak of, and so it was directory assistance or the phone book. That's what he did. And so I went into directory assistance. I said, there was in the very back of Personality Types, it was a picture of Don in a teeny little, like 6-point print, really tiny, of Don Richard Riso has a consulting business in New York called Enneagram Personality Types Incorporated. So I called directory assistance. Do you have an Enneagram Personality Types? Yes, here's the number. Got on the phone, called it, and then this deep voice that I came to know very well answered the phone. This basso profundo, and I said, I'm young person. I really like your book. I've been studying this kind of stuff for a while. Would you be interested in getting together and talking a bit? And he said, no, I don't really do that. However, if you want a consultation about your type, I can do that. So
Very
said,
formal.
okay, how much does it cost? And he told me. And at the time, I was working for a Korean software company. And I was their technical writer and in charge of all the documentation and instructions and all that stuff. Anything that had to be done in English, I did. And I wasn't translating. I was writing it in English and they were translating it into Korean. But it was, an East Asian company, and we worked long hours. And so Don and I had arranged to meet at my lunchtime. And when I went to go, my boss said, you can't go to lunch. I need you here today. But there was no cell phone, no way for me to call Don or warn him or anything. I left a message for him. Second time, same thing happened. He said, no, you can't go. Third time, I figure three's the charm. I set to meet Don. He agrees. He's getting skeptical, of course. And then my boss again says, no, you can't go. So I looked at him, took a deep breath. I said, then I have to respectfully resign my position. I said, I am not Korean. I am an American working with you, and I respect what you're doing. I think the company's good, but when I make promises or make agreements to people outside of this, I have to honor that. And when you don't let me do that, You put me in a bad position, so I
Mm.
have to respectfully resign." And he was shocked. And he said, "Really?" I said, "Yes. And I'm going to go meet this person now."
Mm.
And I said, "And we can talk later. I will not leave you in a bad way. If you need me to help train somebody, I will. But I'm done." And I went to meet Don, and he was we met at the American Museum of Natural History, and he was standing outside on the steps, and I think he was anticipating me not showing up again, but he liked to tell the story of watching me bouncing up the stairway toward him and realizing I was the guy. But there were weird mystical things when we met, and one thing that Don used to always say, and he would tell the groups, you probably heard him say it sometimes, that when I approached him, the first thing he ever said to me was, "Who sent you?" I said, "Nobody." And he goes, "I have the strong feeling someone sent you to me."
Oh,
I
wild.
said, "Well, not that I know of." I said, "But I just quit my job to meet you." He goes, he thought I was joking. I said, "No, really." He goes, "You're kidding." He said, "Well, let's not waste our time then." So we went and sat down under the big dinosaur inside, the big skeleton, and started talking. And we ended up talking for like 4 hours. It was
Wow.
just 1 hour consultation. But of course, I had this background in the Gurdjieff work, which he didn't know. And he was asking me all kind of questions about that. And I was telling him how I saw his idea of the levels might plug into that, et cetera. And we had this wonderful conversation. So at the end, I said, "Okay, here's your fee." He said, "I can't take that now."
Mm.
I said, "Why?" I said, "I'm just keeping the agreement." He says, "Yes, but," he says, "I think I learned as much, if not more, than you did."
Mm. Mm.
And he says, it doesn't feel right. Don was a good old four. It was what felt right. He
Yeah.
says, "Feel right to me." And
Oh, beautiful.
I said, "Well, then what are we going to do?" And he was quiet. He said, "Let's give the money to a homeless shelter or a soup kitchen."
Hmm.
That's what we did. We went to a church there on the Upper West Side and donated that money to a soup
Hmm.
kitchen for the homeless. And that
Beautiful.
was the beginning of our connection.
Yeah. Wild. What a coming together. Yeah. Well. Hmm.
It was about maybe a number of months after that when I was looking for a new job because I after that job I got another one. I was working for a record company, so that was very exciting. And then our record company got acquired, and all of us got fired.
Oh.
So So I was looking for a job again, and Don very timidly, called up one day and said, "Would you consider coming to work with me?"
Hmm.
Just to be an assistant. It wasn't anything glorified, but I figured it would be interesting. He was interesting, and it would give me flexible hours so I could keep working on music and other stuff. But little did I know what was going to happen.
Yeah. Boy, what an evolution that occurred after that. Just yeah. So I wonder if it would be if you'd be up for a part two down the road.
Yeah,
I know.
sure.
Yeah. So I just want to check that out because there's so many lovely things to talk about. But I wonder if you would be up for talking a little bit about that creativity book
Oh, yeah, yeah.
or the holy ideas, just to maybe flesh that out a little bit if you got the
Yeah,
time for it.
sure. Just you can say a little bit about that. Well, these days for many years, you sought me out. I went to the Enneagram Institute, and I've still got stuff there, and we still got the Ready test and so forth. So that's a wonderful resource. But these days, for me, primarily, there's RussHudson.com, and if people go there and sign up, you get notified on everything I'm doing, and we put out monthly inner practices and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like a different era now. We're learning different ways to do the work. Couple main things I've got on the plate. I'm working on a book with my friend and colleague Catherine Bell,
Mm.
who is a very powerful uh, teacher in the realm of bringing presence and awareness into corporations and teams, and she's really great at that. But we're working on a book about creativity and the Enneagram,
Yeah.
but not like how does a four create? How does a five create? It's not that. It's not really type based. It's more about what does each of the nine Enneagram points teach us about the creative process?
Yeah.
What are the gifts of each point? What are some of the ways we can get stuck in each of the points?
Yeah.
So that's fun and
Awesome.
interesting, and we're hard at work in that book. And the other thing is through my website, I'm doing annual year-long courses. We just wrapped one up based on the audio book I did for Sounds True, Nine Gateways to Presence.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And we're about to do a year-long on the Holy Ideas. We'll begin in February, I believe, but all the details are on my website. But it's a year-long looking at what the Enneagram teaches us about what we might call non-duality, deeper consciousness, and so forth. How does it kind of plug into that level of spirituality? So that's should be fun. And I see your book has just had a good anniversary, right?
Yeah, it's getting used around the world. There's a new group in out of Ireland called Friendly Circle Berlin, who started during 2020 COVID a new form of recovery, which is focused on emotional sobriety. So it's taking the best principles of the 12 steps, but then inviting in all sorts of different healing mediums for people to grow and expand, because people hit a ceiling, and the focus on certainly the 12 steps isn't inner work, but everybody hits that point at some point, and they've really been trying to produce monthly webinars on, could be family systems, could be Buddhism. I've been doing once a month on one of the types, and so anyway, the book is out there, people are reading it, and so so far so good.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah,
was thinking the other day, I was thinking of you. I was thinking about how when in the process of the 12 steps, you hit shock points. And
absolutely.
those shock points are moments where you either bring in some new thing, like you're
That's
just
right.
talking about,
That's right.
or you might lose your sobriety. That could be the shock. And
Well, and that happens a lot with people, more than people like to maybe acknowledge it. Folks, I've been sober 24 years, they've worked this strong program, and they hit a shock point, and their program way of being doesn't touch it. It doesn't create a new opening to a higher awareness. And if they don't know that that's where they're at, they get discouraged and they disappear. So, I mean, that was one of the hopes of my book, was to create some framework for understanding you're going to hit shock points, and that's not a bad thing. Your recovery work has brought you there. So anyway, they're calling it emotional sobriety. I know that word's been around a long time, but it's it's a new movement on an international level. So I'm excited to be a part of that.
yeah, sounds wonderful. I'm really happy to hear about that.
Yeah,
And
thanks.
just feel like we were saying, just to feel the weaving of these different branches of the tree coming out
Yeah,
and trying to
yeah,
help humanity come to a shock point.
yeah. It's amazing, and just grateful to be able to be helpful from time to time. So yeah. So look, it's just been a pleasure to be with you, and just really love hearing your story, and would love to do a part two down the road. I know you're busy as can be, but I'll get in touch and see if we can continue this conversation.
Yeah, I got time for you, Michael. So you
Oh,
got
thank
me.
you.
We'll
And
make it happen.
and just again, a huge thanks for the introduction you did in the book. It really, blew me away. So thank you.
You're so welcome, and thank you.
Okay. God bless.
God bless.